Part 72. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 711. Chapter 711. A reminder for you. Mr. Zhou was so frightened that cold sweat broke out on his forehead. Young Master Li, do you know this child? Li Lei smiled meaningfully. Not only do we know each other, but we are also very familiar with him. By the way, let me introduce you to him. This is Ye Xiaowai, and his guardian is Ye Xinling. This time, not only Mr. Zhou, but also several other adults who had ridiculed Xiaowai had cold sweat on their foreheads. It's not that they are afraid of Ye Xinling herself, but that the scandal between her and Li Lei has been spreading for a long time. Although the entertainment industry has always been true and false, there is no smoke without smoke. If they say that she and Li Lei are not ambiguous at all, they don't believe it. Of the child who offended the woman that Mr. Li cared about. Although this relationship is a bit difficult to pronounce, it is also very scary. Mr. Zhou hurriedly explained, Young Master Li, I was just joking with the child, don't worry about it. Oh? Are you kidding? Li Lei smiled half-heartedly. Under the sunlight, the sharp knife marks on his cheek were shocking. How about I make a joke with you? Kneel down for this kid and kowtow 3 times to admit his mistake. Mr. Zhou looked embarrassed. He was a very face-conscious person. Asking him to kneel and kowtow in public, but to do it to such a young child, was as uncomfortable as killing him. He murmured, This, Mr. Li, don't force others to make things difficult. Forcing others to make things difficult, Li Lei still smiled half-heartedly, that's right, I have never been a person who makes things difficult for others. Forget it about kowtow. Thank you, young Master Li, thank you, young Master Li. Mr. Zhou wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and let out a long breath. It turned out that young Master Li was so easy to talk to. He thought that how high the position of that little was in young Master Li's heart. It turned out that young Master Li was so easy to talk to. That's all. It seems that young Master Li is just playing with Ye Xinling. Thinking like this, his expression became much more relaxed. Li Lei stopped paying attention to him and looked down at Xiao Hui. Xiao Xiaowai, are you okay? His voice was very soft, completely different from the gloomy and ferocious look just now. As early as when he came over, Xiaowai poked his head and looked behind him, hoping to find a veterinarian to save his pony. He searched and searched, but couldn't find half a person. But when he turned around, he found that the veterinarian who just refused to treat his pony was kneeling next to the pony, concentrating on the treatment. Uncle Li called the doctor to treat Xiao Ma. The little child was very smart and guessed it right away. Li Lei smiled and touched his head, silly boy, I will bring the doctor here after I get the call. How can the doctor on site come faster? He put down the phone and learned about the situation from the club, and learned that this was if there is a big accident and there is a veterinarian on site, they will be recruited directly. As for the life and death of other horses, as a person who has been fighting on the battlefield for so many years, he has long lost the heart of the Holy Mother. When resources are limited, he will definitely give priority to rescuing his own people. As expected, Xiao Xiaowai was his child and quickly understood what he meant. Thank you, Uncle Li, he said. After saying that, he ran in the direction of the pony and went to look after it. Li Lei was left alone to face Mr. Zhou, Du Zheng, and others. Li Lei asked Du Zheng, what's going on? He had known the Du family for a long time and knew that Du Zheng was a clear-headed child. Du Zheng said, I took Aqiang and the others to ride horses. The weather was good and the road conditions were good, so they ran faster. Unexpectedly, when I rushed out of the woods, I met Xiaobai, Xiaowai, Lanlan on the roadside. The horse was frightened, and even the group of horses behind it were frightened. Aqiang's horse lost control and hit Xiaowai. This kid was so stupid. When Du Zheng said this, he paused and said, well, I meant that Aqiang was stupid. In fact, he wanted to say that Xiao Hui was stupid, but because of Li Lei's face, he changed his tune abruptly. Mr. Zhou. Li Lei. Go on. Li Lei looked at Du Zheng. So Du Zheng continued, Xiao Hui had no time to dodge, but his pony saved him. It pushed him away at the critical moment, and the pony itself was injured. Li Lei narrowed his eyes slightly. Aqiang? Which family is the child from? Du Zheng glanced at Mr. Zhou. Mr. Zhou, whose face had only slightly improved, suddenly started to sweat again. It's me, my incompetent son. Mr. Li, you don't remember the faults of villains. For the sake of your child being young, don't talk to him. Does he care about it? Li Lei said calmly, there's really no need to worry about it. After saying that, he walked towards Xiao Hui and Xioma. Mr. Zhou looked at his back and wiped the cold sweat from his forehead vigorously. The secretary on the side patted his chest and said, oh my God, I was really scared to death. Fortunately, Mr. Li is easy to talk to and doesn't really feel sorry for you. It seems that my old face has some status in the world. After Mr. Zhou was frightened, he was quite smug. He was probably the only one in the world who could escape unharmed after offending young Master Li. The entourage also agreed and flattered Mr. Zhou. Du Zheng on the side looked at Mr. Zhou with some pity. For the sake of getting to know Aqiang, Uncle Zhou, don't blame me for not reminding you. Uncle Li seems to be easy to talk to on the surface, but the last one, the family that offended him and allowed him to treat it so lightly, are they still living on the streets as beggars? What? Mr. Zhou was suddenly horrified. Du Zheng said, my third uncle once said that Uncle Li only disdains talking nonsense with others when he is really angry. Because there is no need to say anything more to a family that is about to be destroyed. Mr. Zhou felt his hands and feet were getting cold. No, it's not serious, is it? He looked pale and forced a smile. Young Master Du, are you kidding me to entertain me? That's it, it's up to you whether you believe it or not. Du Zheng dropped these words and walked away. He is not in the habit of cleaning up the mess for these guys who look down on others. Being able to verbally remind him is already the most benevolent thing. As for whether he can save Mr. Zhou, it only depends on Mr. Zhou's own luck. Zhong stood there, in a dilemma. Everyone in the entourage looked at each other in embarrassment. The words they had just praised Mr. Zhou for his face were still in their ears. Who would have thought that things would turn around so quickly? It turned out that Mr. Li didn't just care about it, but he wanted to care about it so hard that he didn't bother. You are talking nonsense to Mr. Zhou. How is it possible? Thinking of kowtowing 3 times, Mr. Zhou felt a trace of luck in his heart. Young Master Du also said that only when young Master Li is really angry, he is too lazy to talk nonsense with others. But, how can Li Xiaodong be so angry about a child adopted by another woman who is not a relative? That's right. At this time, his secretary also calmed down. It's not his biological son, so why is it worth it for young Master Li to go to war? I think young Master Li definitely doesn't want to get involved in this matter, and it's not in the way of the child's guardian. It's Yasing Ling, I have to take care of it, so I just pretended to let you go easily. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 712. Chapter 712 Meeting Ceremony. Zhou always felt that what the secretary said made sense. He also didn't believe that Li Lei would go to war for a child who was not related to him. If Li Lei really liked that child, I'm afraid that child wouldn't be riding an inferior horse with impure blood. Thinking like this, Mr. Zhou felt at ease and put the matter behind him. Over there, Li Lei accompanied Xiao Hui to treat the pony. The veterinarian was cautious and tried his best. The veterinarian felt that he was extremely unlucky today. He didn't pay attention to this little child, so he was offended. However, he didn't expect that this child turned out to be the little baby adopted by the singing queen Yasing Ling. He received every possible care from a big shot like Lilei. The veterinarian was about to cry. It turned out that the child who said "I will give you a lot of money" was not joking. He could really give out a lot of money. The veterinarian felt that not only had he offended someone, but he also missed an opportunity to make a fortune. It was truly a human tragedy, and it couldn't be more miserable. For the current plan, the only way is to treat the pony well and make up for the mistakes. He fixed the pony's bones and applied medicine. He was so busy that he was sweating profusely and finally got it done. When the staff carried the stretcher to carry the pony away, the veterinarian said to the child very politely, "Young master, your pony is fine. As long as you take good care of it, it will not have any sequelae." The child's eyes were still filled with tears. "You must take good care of it." The veterinarian repeatedly assured that he would take good care of the pony, and then the child turned around and left. Lilei held his little hand and walked with him towards the hotel. Along the way, he listened to the child's story about the thrilling accident, and his heart tightened. He only regretted that he was not there at the time and could not protect the child. "From now on, let's learn fighting skills from Dad," Lilei said. "If you encounter danger, you can defend yourself." The child nodded, "Okay." Lilei added, "Xiao Xiaowai, you have to be prepared. Dad will teach you a lot of things in the future. Maybe you will have a hard time. But only then will you become very powerful. When you grow up, you can protect yourself and the important things around you." Xiao Xiaowai raised his head in confusion. "Is it like Dad protected me and Xiao Ma today?" Lilei said, "Yes, because Dad is stronger than that Uncle Joe, he can protect you. When you grow up, you must also be the strongest person. In this world, only the strongest man can protect you. Something to protect, you know. Is that why everyone is so desperate to become stronger? There are many people who want to become stronger, but there are very few people who can become stronger. You have to work hard." "I will." The child nodded seriously. Lilei rubbed the child's little head. A flash of relief flashed in his eyes. At this moment, he was very grateful to Xiaomoyan, his brother-in-law, for teaching his child to be so sensible, unlike Li Rui, who didn't want to do anything but eat, drink and have fun. "By the way," Lilei said, "your mother doesn't know what happened yet. When you return to your residence later, you should go and wash off the mud first, so as not to worry her." Xiao Hui nodded in agreement and went to take a shower. In the room, before Xiaoling got up from her nap, Lilei secretly came to her lips and kissed her, then kissed her again reluctantly. This time, Xiaoling gently opened her eyes and woke up. Seeing Lilei's face close at hand. "What are you doing?" She fell into a drowsy sleep. Lilei said nothing and continued to kiss her. "You bastard." Her voice sounded lazily after a nap, and she stretched out her hand to push Lilei twice, but Lilei grabbed his wrist. "Disgusting," she said vaguely. He chuckled lowly, "I'm just annoying you. This man is indeed a gangster." She glared at him unhappily, her cheeks bulging, looking somewhat similar to Xiao Hui when he was angry. Lilei couldn't help but reach out and pinch her face. The soft touch made people reluctant to let go. Xiaoling was so full of tofu that she was considering whether to kick him out of bed when she saw the bathroom door opened and a wet Xiao Hui came out. "Mom," Xiao Hui called out softly. "Why are you taking a shower at this time?" Xiaoling really pushed Lilei away this time. How could it be inappropriate for a child to see the two of them like this? She supported the edge of the bed with one hand and sat up. Xiaowai said, "I went out to play for a while at noon and got dirty." He dismissed the matter lightly. Xiaoling didn't pursue it, got up, and lazily went to the yard to bask in the sun. Xiao Hui was so disturbed outside today that he was too lazy to go out, so he played in the yard with his mother. There was a small forest behind the yard, with scattered berries hanging on the trees. He asked the staff and said they could be picked and eaten, so he happily took a small basket to pick the fruits. After picking it, he ran back and presented the treasure to the two adults. Li Lei happily counted the fruits with his children, while Xiaoling was only responsible for eating them. Well, they were delicious. Dad, Dad, there are many more in the woods over there, but they are too high and I can't reach them. Can you hold me to pick them later? Xiao Hui happily talked to Li Lei. Li Lei laughed at him for being stupid. You can't even climb trees. Xiaohui blinked. I want daddy to hug me. He looked coquettish. Li Lei actually bent down and picked him up. Let's go pick fruits. However, after taking a few steps, he saw a man standing at the entrance of the yard, staring at them in amazement. Li Er, you. The man pointed at him and the child, shocked. What did this child call you? The father and son looked at each other. Unfortunately, someone discovered them. This is your uncle Du Yunfen, Li Lei introduced the child. He took a breath and thought of his words in a second. Yunfen, this is my godson. The man who came over was Du Yunfen. This time, he brought his nephew to the club to play. Unexpectedly, something happened in the afternoon. The nephew said that Li Lei was also there, so Du Yunfen thought about coming over to have a look. But I saw such a horrifying scene. This child actually called Li Lei daddy. Isn't this the child adopted by Ye Xinling? Is it really okay for you to accept him as your godson? Du Yunfen dislikes Xiaoling very much. He was just about to persuade Li Lei not to get so close to the child when he saw Xiaoling sitting next to him and eating berry. He was silent for a moment, but still did not directly complain about his beloved woman in front of his good friends. Xiaoling slowly raised her head and saw Du Yunfen. Remember to give him a greeting gift, she said inarticulately. This is your nephew too. What is my nephew? Du Yunfen exploded. He and I are not relatives, so don't be relatives. Li Lei was too lazy to talk nonsense with him, so he grabbed his wrist, took off the valuable agar wood bracelet from his hand, and gave it to Xiao Hui. Take it to play with, as a meeting gift. Call me uncle. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 713. Chapter 713, Holding a High Hand. Uncle Xiao Xiaowei called out sweetly. Du Yunfen is not feeling well. What is this, forced buying and selling? His string of agar wood beads was worth a lot of money. Why did he just go out to chat with friends and then disappear? Is he unjust? He glared at Xiao Hui and said, Who is your godfather? Xiao Xiaowei flattened his mouth in embarrassment. Li Lei said shamelessly, You are Xiaoling's god-brother, aren't you Xiao Hui's goduncle? I remember that at the blind date banquet, in order to allow Xiaoling to enter smoothly, I recognized Du Yunfen as my god-brother. Du Yunfen's face turned dark, and he remembered that there was still this problem, and said disgustedly, At that time, it was a matter of urgency, but it is different now. The matter has already passed. Forget about being a brother or something. I don't have such a sister. Xiaoling raised her head from the small table piled with berries and glanced at him. Du Yunfen stared back not to be outdone. Li Lei smoothed things over. You are Xiao Hui's uncle, it's settled. Du Yunfen was surprised. Li Er, why don't you care so much about Li Rui? You didn't ask your biological son to recognize me as your uncle. Instead, you found an unrelated child to be a relative. Are you okay, you? Of course Li Lei couldn't tell him that Li Rui was not related by blood to him, let alone that Xiao Hui was actually his biological child. He smiled, put on the string of agar wood beads for Xiao Hui, and said, Don't worry about it. Anyway, remember to be good to Xiao Hui in the future. Whoever dares to bully him, you have to be his backer. Du Yunfen rolled his eyes at the sky. Am I full enough? They were chatting here, and over there. Xiaoling finally slowly finished eating a bunch of berries, wiped her hands gracefully with a tissue, and walked over. Under the watchful eyes of the two grown men, she took off the string of agarwood beads from the child's hand and returned them to Du Yunfan calmly. Since Mr. Du is so reluctant, let's forget it. Her voice was clear, and she lowered her head to coax Xiaohui, be good, let's not recognize this uncle. When the real uncle comes, let him give you good things. Xiao Shaowai looked at the beads, then at his mother, and nodded. Li Lei burst into tears. Over there, the brothers haven't settled down yet, but over here, his own woman has become arrogant again. Xiaoling, don't be like this. He stuffed the string of agarwood beads from Du Yunfan back into Xiao Hui's arms. The child is so young, if someone doesn't take good care of him, he will have many uncles to support him. Xiaoling raised her eyebrows slightly. Li Lei was afraid that she would say any more words of rejection, so he quickly said to Xiaohui, put it on quickly. Xiao Hui's black and white eyes looked between the adults. Finally, he slowly put the string of beads back on his wrist, raised his head, and said to Du Yunfan in a sweet voice, I owe brother Du Zheng 2 favors. Now that I wear the beads you gave me, I only owe him 1. Hey, little guy, are you okay with your arithmetic? Du Yunfan was so angry that he said, if you dare, I'll give you a meeting gift and treat you as your uncle, or are you giving me face? Xiao Shaowai blinked his eyes but said nothing. Du Yunfan couldn't bear to look at this stupid and cute child, and turned to Li Lei, are you sure you want to be this little idiot's godfather? With the speed at which he offends people, in a few more years, his enemies will be able to tear you apart. Li Lei's face also twitched, and he tried his best to look at Du Yunfan with a sincere expression, believe me, you will definitely not lose if you treat him as your nephew. Not only will he not lose, he will make a lot of money, right? If Du Yunfan knew about this child who is your biological uncle? I'm afraid it's too late to cry and lick him. There are many people in this world who want to be related to the Xia family, but there are some people who do not know how blessed they are. Xiaoling smiled half-heartedly and was too lazy to care about Li Lei's little thoughts. What protects Shaowai? They were all false, but it was because Du Yunfan had offended her and Li Lei was worried that his good brother would be retaliated by the Xia family, so he deliberately eased the relationship between the two parties. Xiaoling lazily sat back on the wicker chair in the small courtyard and drank tea. Du Yunfan muttered for a while, but he didn't want to embarrass his good brother. Although he didn't like Xiaoling or Xiaohui very much, since he recognized his nephew, he should just accept it. It didn't matter. He also followed Xiaoling's example and sat down to drink tea. Where is Du Zheng? Li Lei asked him. I didn't have time to talk to him properly at the racecourse just now. This child has grown so big in a blink of an eye, and you didn't even bring it to me to see. Du Yunfan said, that boy came after me. Why, he hasn't arrived yet. He put his head and looked outside. There was a noise coming from outside the courtyard, and soon, several people came over together, including Du Zheng, Mr. Zhou, and the child named A Qiang. Du Yunfan frowned, Zheng, why did you bring so many people here? They are here to see Uncle Li Lei, Du Zheng said, with an expression that had nothing to do with him. They said they accidentally offended Uncle Li Lei and came to apologize. As soon as he finished speaking, the obese Mr. Zhou had already nodded and walked up to Li Lei and said, Young Master Li, please spare me, young Master Li, I am blind. Please be kind and spare the Zhou family one time. After saying this, Xiaoling, who was drinking tea next to her, became curious, what's going on? Du Yunfan looked at this woman with disgust. In the afternoon, Li Lei just stood up for your son and severely punished those who offended him. Why, you didn't know? Xiaoling is a little sluggish. Afternoon. Didn't that stinky gangster secretly kiss her in the bedroom this afternoon? What's going on? She looked at Li Lei, what are you hiding from me? Li Lei blamed Du Yunfan for talking too much. However, Since the matter had reached this point, he could only tell Xiaoling. President Zhou scolded Xiao Hui this time. I asked him to kowtow to Xiao Hui, but he refused, so I ordered Tan Ying to suppress Zhou with the stock price of the company. They will go bankrupt in a few days. Xiaoling. If she remembers correctly, the Zhou family is considered a small and powerful celebrity family in the city. Boss Li, is it really okay for you to bankrupt someone just because you disagree? Over there, Mr. Zhou had a mournful face. Young Master Li, it's really you who did it. Please stop, please. I beg you, I can do anything you want. Really, he didn't expect that Li Lei was. He really made up his mind to vent his anger on his child. 2 hours ago, news came from the company that the stock price had plummeted. He thought it was just a coincidence. But then, all kinds of negative news continued to spread. The original discussion between the Zhou family, several big deals that went very smoothly, suddenly went south. The head of the Zhou family was furious and kept asking which unscrupulous child had offended the Li family. Only then did Mr. Zhou realize that something was wrong. For the current plan, the only thing left is to beg Li Lei to show his noble hand. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 714. Chapter 714. Kowtow 3 times. Li Lei looked at him indifferently. Do you know how to beg for mercy now? He took the lead in bullying Xiao Hui earlier, so why did he ignore Xiao Hui's pleas? The child's wish was very simple. He just wanted to save a pony, but they were cruelly rejected. A slight smile appeared on the corner of Li Lei's lips. Under the bright sunshine, his eyes were so gloomy that it made people feel chilled in their hearts. It's easy for me to spare you. First, kneel down with your son and kowtow to Xiao Hui 3 times. Just apologize first. I won't kowtow, Mr. Zhou's son, the child named Aqiang, shouted loudly. He was obviously spoiled in normal times, but now he was still arrogant. Why should I kowtow to that bastard? Wasn't he adopted by a singer? Dad, didn't you say before that singers are all actors, so you can play as many as you want, so you don't have to give them face? Du Yunfan and Du Zheng on the side gasped. This naughty boy really dared to say anything. They couldn't help but look at Li Lei. Sure enough, Li Lei's expression became even more ugly. Li Lei was just about to give the father and son a look when suddenly, 2 slender white fingers with a faint coolness touched his hand. It was Xiaoling who held him back. She smiled lightly and said to the Zhou family and his son, singers are all actors, huh? You can play as many as you want, huh? Jojo broke out in cold sweat. Yeah, Aqiang didn't mean that. What does that mean? Xiaoling's tone showed no emotion or anger. In fact, she was very angry. Although there were many people in the entertainment industry who rose to power by relying on their financial sponsors, there were also many colleagues who worked their own. The words of the Zhou family and his son were too disrespectful. Mr. Zhou muttered and explained in a low voice, children's words have no restraints, children's words have no restraints. He was originally not afraid of Xiaoling. After all, although Xiaoling was rich, she was not a business person. In the past few years, Feng Qianshang Company had only been able to make a profit without losing money. However, he saw the she put on young Master Li's arm, so casual and familiar that even a fool would not believe there was nothing ambiguous between them. She is Mr. Li's woman and cannot afford to offend her. Thinking of this, Mr. Zhou became even more cautious. The child is ignorant, and if he says something wrong, I will teach him a lesson. He turned around and scolded his son, why don't you kneel down? Apologize to Miss Ye and young Master Shea. Why? Zhou Qiang was still unconvinced. I don't. Mr. Zhou no longer cared about his image at this time, and kicked his son directly to his knees. Quickly apologize. Although he felt sorry for his son, compared to the survival of the entire family, this heartache was more serious. Nothing. If the Zhou family goes bankrupt, How can he continue to enjoy glory and wealth? Zhou Qiang burst into tears. Dad is a bad person. Dad bullies me. You are all bad people. His cry was harsh, like a demonic sound that penetrated her brain, and Xiaoling couldn't help but cover her ears and take a few steps back. Seeing this, Li Lei stretched out his long arms and easily took Xiaoling into his arms. He stretched out his hand to protect her ears, looking very fond of her. Du Yunfan on the side looked at it and shook his head. These two people showed their affection in broad daylight as if there was no one around. Is there any justice in it? My brother, I am afraid that he will fall into the hands of this woman in this life. As a single dog, he could only silently cover Du Zheng's ears, and he did not forget to reprimand Mr. Zhou. Are you here to apologize or mourn? Get out quickly, you won't be bankrupt if you keep howling like this. It's a problem. Mr. Zhou was heartbroken when he heard this. Du Yunfan's words clearly meant that he wanted to destroy the Zhou family. He turned to look at Li Lei and Xiaoling, and saw that they did not express any objection to Du Yunfan's words, but looked at his father and son with disgust. Knowing that something was wrong, he quickly went to beg Xiaowai, young master Xiaowai, can you bear to see us go bankrupt and live on the street? Please persuade Miss Ye and Mr. Li to let us go. Although Xiao Hui is usually silly and cute, he is not confused on key issues. I just heard him say softly, you almost killed my pony, why didn't you think of it as a life at that time? Uncle Li asked you to apologize to me, but you are not willing, how can I spare you? I'm sorry, Mr. Zhou apologized with a sad face, I was wrong, I really know I was wrong. Xiao Hui stood still and said, you haven't knelt down yet. Mr. Zhou was stunned. He didn't expect this child to be so difficult to fool. He was very embarrassed for a moment. Is it okay to ask his son to kneel down to the child in front of him, but let him kneel down himself? Stop making trouble, it's so embarrassing for him to be such a big man. With a trace of luck, he smiled at Xiao Hui, young master, you see, you are so young and cannot afford my kneeling. It will ruin your luck. Just let my son kowtow for you more size, okay? Xiao Hui is such a cute kid, and he couldn't help but show contempt on his face when he heard this. Is there any Mr. Zhou who is such a father? In order to avoid kowtowing, how many more times would you rather let your son kowtow? Xiao Hui glanced at Zhou Qiang, who was rolling and howling on the ground, and suddenly felt sorry for him. Little Xiaowai, who had a strong sense of justice, decided to help little boy Zhou Qiang to stop the head he shouldn't kowtow to. A man is a great man. When one person does something, the other person will look after him, the child's soft voice came, but the words he said were not soft at all. And it can't break my luck, so hurry up and do it, the uncle said, he has xia in him. Family Phoenix's bloodline was extremely noble from birth. In this world, apart from blood relatives, there was no etiquette that he could not afford. Mr. Zhou was forced to do nothing and wanted to beg. Xiao Hui's face already showed an impatient look, don't disturb my sister. I will count to 3. If you don't kowtow, you will never have to kowtow. The uncles and nephews of the Du family on the side couldn't help but marvel at this little child threatening others. I didn't expect that little Xiaowai, who I thought was just a silly and cute kid, turned out to be so majestic. They somewhat understood why Li Lei favored this child. This little Xiaowai was many times stronger than that Li Rui. Mr. Zhou looked at the indifferent people and gradually despaired. Xiao Xiaowai has already started counting, 3, 2. With a plop, Mr. Zhou fell to his knees and knelt down. It's because I'm stupid, because I'm too blind to see. Young Master Xiaowai, I apologize to you. Please be kind and spare the Zhou family this time. As he said this, he kowtowed 3 times on the ground. When he lifted it up, a large piece of his forehead had been broken. Xiao Hui then showed a satisfied look. Li Lei was also very satisfied. Despite his young age, this child was already very independent and capable. Although Mr. Zhou came to apologize this time because of Li Lei's power, it was Xiao Hui's own ability to make Mr. Zhou implement the apology. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 715. Chapter 715, You look single at first glance. This child will have great potential in the future. Before he could stop thinking about it, Xiao Hui over there had already made a majestic face. Okay, you can get up. There is also your son. Ask your son to come over and kowtow to apologize. The little guy was holding a grudge. As soon as Zhou Qiang came in, he would not let him go if he insulted his mother. Mr. Zhou kowtowed himself, feeling very angry in his heart. He did not dare to get angry with Xiao Hui and others, so he had to take it out on his own son. You little beast, come here. He picked up his crying son from the ground, knelt down in front of Xiao Hui, then pressed the child's head and kowtowed to Xiao Hui 3 times. Release. The child was in pain and angry, crying and cursing, You little bastard, you stinky bastard, you will never die. Xiao Hui said, Who are you scolding? Mr. Zhou angrily kicked the child on the ground several times. Shut up, you little beast. Believe it or not, I'll beat you to death. He beat his child ruthlessly, on the one hand to calm the anger of Xiao Hui and others, and on the other hand, on the one hand, I am too frustrated and need to vent my anger on my children. His fists and kicks were very heavy, and soon the child was beaten to the point where he no longer dared to curse, and even the child could barely stop crying. Mr. Zhou then looked at Xiao Hui again and smiled flatteringly, Young master, are you satisfied this time? Xiao Hui turned his head and glanced at his parents. Xiaoling thought they were noisy, Get out of here. Li Lei saw her attitude, so he also said, Go away. What about the Zhou family? Mr. Zhou asked cautiously and bravely. Li Lei sneered. Mr. Zhou didn't dare to ask any more questions and hurriedly took the child away. Xiaoling then came out of Li Lei's arms and sat back on the chair. How come I just took a nap and you caused so many troubles? Xiao Hui smiled silly and pretended to be innocent. Li Lei didn't want her to worry, so he changed the subject. Let me introduce to you, the name of the child next to Yunfeng is Du Zheng. He is the only son of the head of the Du group. Come on, Zheng, this is your aunt yet. When Du Zheng saw Li Lei mentioning him, he stepped forward generously and called Aunt Yet. Xiao Hui puffed up his baby face and corrected, It's my sister. Du Zheng looked at the cute little creature in front of him in puzzlement. Xiao Hui explained to him seriously, Look, if I call her sister, it's sister. If you call her aunt, wouldn't you be a generation younger than me? The corners of Du Zheng's mouth twitched. He was a generation shorter than this 4 or 5-year-old kid. I can't stand it. So he immediately changed his words, Sister Yet. Xiaoling smiled brightly. Her son understood a woman's thoughts best and knew that no woman wanted to be called old. Not like his idiot father. What kind of aunt? She deserves it for not being able to catch up with her again. She was in a good mood, rubbed Xiao Hui's little head, and glanced at Li Lei again. Li Lei was stunned into silence. Damn, is this his biological son? How to completely dismantle your own father? Over there, Du Yunfen was also confused in the wind. What kind of messed up seniority is this? Li Er, Xiao Hui calls you uncle, sister Ye Xingling, I am your brother, and I am Ye Xingling's brother. He was deeply moved. I feel that my IQ is not enough. Can't this child just call Aunt Ye Xingling? Xiao Hui glanced at Du Yunfen calmly, Uncle. What are you doing? Du Yunfen deeply felt that this child's IQ was worrying. Xiao Hui said, You're not married yet and don't have a girlfriend, right? Du Yunfen was surprised. How did you know? Xiao Hui had an expression like I just guessed it. Du Yunfen was confused. On the side, Li Lei came to his senses and laughed so hard, ha 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 ha, Yunfen, Yunfen, you deserve to be single. Even my little Xiaowai is better at chasing girls than you. Ha 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 ha, I'm laughing so hard. Du Yunfen responded with a black line, what about you? Have you caught up with the girl? In the small courtyard, Li Lei's laughter suddenly stopped. Xiaoling, who was drinking tea calmly on the side, simply couldn't be bothered to look at this pair of living treasures. She began to seriously consider whether her son would become stupid if he had such a father and recognized such an unreliable god-uncle. Beside him, Xiao Shaowai raised his little head and asked Duzhang, Brother Duzhang, how are the brothers and sisters who were injured while riding horses doing now, are they okay? Duzhang said, none of them are life-threatening. A few of them were seriously injured and are being treated in the hospital. The others have been discharged from the hospital. After a pause, he added, it's because they didn't look at the road while riding on their own. It's none of your business. Even though Du Zheng had repeatedly called Xiao Hui a little idiot before, he knew very well that Xiao Hui was not to blame for the accident. It was because the children riding the horses were too fast and did not pay attention to people. But Xiao Hui said, things always happen because of me. Brother Du Zheng, please take me to see everyone. I will bring them delicious berries. Du Zheng was even more impressed by this child. This time, so many children were injured all of a sudden, and all of them were rich or noble. If it were an ordinary person, they would have been busy abdicating their responsibilities, but where is this little Xiaowai in front of me? Instead of escaping, he took on some of the responsibilities that were not his own. This is leadership style. If Feng Qianshang Company had never closed down, when the child grew up and took over the management, he should be able to become a force that cannot be ignored in the business world. Du Zheng liked strong people and preferred to make friends with strong people before they matured. He immediately said, okay, I'll take you there. He took Xiao Shaowai, said goodbye to Li Lei and others, and walked towards the hospital. Xiao Hui left. Xiaoling was bored and staggered out. Li Lei, who was chatting with Du Yunfen, saw it and quickly stopped her. Xiaoling, where are you going? Go find a horse to ride on, Xiaoling said. She hadn't ridden a horse for a long time. When she came to the Nanshan Club this time, although she didn't see Kinga, her heart was swaying when she saw so many horses galloping. Li Lei said, I'll accompany you. He left Du Yunfen behind and chased after him. Du Yunfen, huh? I said. How come this man is so obsessed with and forgets his friends? Can we still be brothers? Over there, Li Lei couldn't hear Du Yunfen's inner complaints, and walked side by side with Xiaoling contentedly. The horses raised by the club are not as good as my Xiaolei, can I take you to ride it? Facing the warm autumn sunshine, Xiaoling said calmly, there is only one. The two of us will ride together. Li Lei smiled. Xiaoling turned her head and glanced at him. This man was indeed a stinky hooligan. Li Lei was quite thick-skinned when he was chasing a girl. He held her little hand regardless. Xiaolei is a stable rider and is very humane. You will definitely like it? Xiaoling. His gentle voice spread in the wind, we haven't ridden together yet. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weiniang. Chapter 716. Chapter 716 Riding the Horse Like the Wind. Perhaps the evening breeze was too warm, or perhaps his voice was too gentle. Xiaoling's heart was slightly stirred by what he said, as if something soft was spreading quietly in her heart. She looked sideways at this man, who looked as handsome as ever, and his smiling eyes looked familiar and reliable. It's really strange. Why is she still attracted to him even though he has not been heard from for 4 years? Is this love? No. It is fate. Like a moth to a flame, you know the danger, you know you will be shattered to pieces, but you can't resist the illusory temptation, it's your destiny. She didn't know how long she could hold on. Perhaps, she would finally melt under his tenderness and face the wind and rain of the world with her hands. However, that is all a matter for the future. At this moment, she was still afraid that this fate that was suddenly severed and suddenly returned would have any thrilling changes in the long years to come. She took her hand out of his. Lilay, her voice was very soft against the evening breeze, we have a child, so let's maintain the superficial peace. He needs his parents. But don't think about going any further. Don't make me annoying. You. The wind in the evening is a bit melancholy and cool. Lilay's palms were empty, and his heart was also empty. Is this the punishment God gave him? 4 years of no news have led to the current difficult pursuit, but he will not give up no matter what. She is his only true love in this life. He cannot imagine how he will spend the rest of his life without her. He took a few steps quickly to keep up with her. When he came to the VIP fostering area, he summoned his Hanoverian horse Xiaolei. The fur all over Xiaolei's body was still as gorgeous and shiny as silk, and his eyes were introverted as he looked down at his master. Xiaolei, Lilay touched its nose, take Xiaoling for a ride. The horse rubbed his hand affectionately, as if it understood the human words, and took 2 steps in the direction of Xiaoling, choosing a position where it was convenient for her to get on the horse. Xiaoling also imitated Lilay and touched it, then turned to look at its owner. You really want to lend me a ride? Let me agree first that I will not ride with you. Lilay smiled warmly and said, you can ride it, I'll have plenty of chances to ride it. Xiaoling looked at him suspiciously. Lilay urged, hurry up and get on the horse. Look, it's getting dark. If you don't ride, you won't be able to ride today. Xiaoling looked at the sky. The clear blue sky was already faintly tinged with a ray of glow. She knew what Lilay said made sense, so she stopped stalling and got on the horse. She is worthy of being a first-class rider for 2 lifetimes. Her posture when mounting the horse is neat and elegant, and she falls steadily on Xiaolei, making a perfect fit for 1 person and 1 horse. Lilay shouted from the side. She looked back and smiled at him proudly, her eyes sparkling with energy and indescribable charm. Looking at it, Lilay felt like there were countless feathers tickling him in his heart. He unconsciously took a few steps forward, trying to persuade her to ride together, Xiaoling. She saw through his thoughts at a glance and smiled again. What a beautiful idea! As soon as her legs were tucked under the horse's belly, the Hanoverian horse with extremely pure blood started to trot. Facing the evening breeze, her mood was in high spirits. However, just after flying for a few seconds, I suddenly felt a weight behind me, and immediately fell into a solid embrace. She was frightened, her hands shook, and she almost let go of the horse's reins. The man behind her steadily stretched out his hand to hold hers, and whispered in her ear, "Be careful." She heard the man's voice and turned back in shame. "Lilay. You." This time he smiled proudly, his eyes as bright as the sun in the sky. He lowered his head. "You got on my horse and you want to leave me alone? How is that possible?" She was still very angry. "You are a gangster." He was proud and did not feel dissatisfied. He hugged her with one hand and controlled the reins with the other. "Don't you know that your man's riding skills are unparalleled in the world? It seems that we need to learn more about her." She blushed and her heart beat, but she was still very angry. She glared at him, but she didn't notice that the horse turned around and her body suddenly lost its balance. She exclaimed and almost fell, but Lilay easily held her waist, allowing her to nestle into his arms more safely. "Don't move," he said, "I'll protect you." These words were like a spell, making her strangely quiet in his arms. The strong horse galloped on the Nanshan grassland, and the trees and gardens retreated like a fleeting glimpse. This is the first time for Xiaoling to lie in the arms of a man and enjoy such a ride. She still remembers that in her previous life, Pei Xian didn't like any strenuous exercise except fighting. Almost every time he rode a horse, she was alone. Even if they happened to ride together a few times, they would just walk slowly and take in the scenery. But this time, it was different from Li Lei. He loves to play as much as she does. He rides a horse very fast, with the sound of wind whistling in his ears, as if he has the whole world under his control. For the first time, she saw the speeding world with a new eye. Beyond his arms were the mountains, the vast waters, the falling clouds, and the flying eagles. But leaning in his arms, she felt so stable and peaceful, just like a moment of eternity. And she is in this eternity, guarding a small world. Unconsciously, she forgot about her anger, as well as the anxiety and uneasiness about the future. Her body gradually relaxed, she adjusted herself into a comfortable position, and put her cheek against his chest. Li Lei took her galloping for a long time, circling all over the mountains and fields before returning to the starting point. He slowed down his horse, lowered his head and kissed the tip of her hair, his voice a little hoarse, "Are you tired?" She shook her head, listening to his strong heartbeat and feeling the slight smell of sweat on his body. The coat of the Hanoverian horse beneath him was smooth and spread like black satin, carrying the weight of their bodies as if they were carrying a small world. She squinted her eyes slightly, lazily. In the grove in early autumn, fallen flowers are in full bloom. Slowly walking through this dream-like fallen forest, she seemed to have forgotten the vow she made not long ago, "Don't even think about going any further sometimes, this is indeed fate. No matter how hard you struggle to resist, it will always bring people back to the track of fate, no matter what way." Seeing that she was a little lazy, Li Lei controlled Xiao Lei to walk slowly in the forest. After walking for a long time, he came to a small wooden house. The signboard of King Yi Ice Cream was clearly visible. "Would you like some ice cream?" he asked her. She nodded. So, he drove Xiao Lei over, got off the horse, and then carefully helped her down. "You sit here and wait while I go inside to buy some." He swept away a fallen leaf with his coat and spread it on a tree stump-shaped seat for her to sit on. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 717. Chapter 717 Meeting Gulin on a narrow road. As expected, she sat down and waited obediently. This ice cream shop is very close to the living area, and the sound of children's play can be heard faintly not far away. Xiaoling hasn't ridden a horse for a long time. When she rested, she felt a little tired. She supported her chin with one hand and lay on the wooden table, staring at a few fallen leaves with half-closed eyes. The breeze rustled the ground. She heard a voice coming from her ear, surprised and sharp, "Yes, Ling." She turned her head lazily and saw a girl in gorgeous clothes standing next to her at some point. She had a close-fitting riding outfit that outlined an extremely hot figure. Her long hair was dyed into fiery red and was flying in the wind. She had a pair of eyes. With sharp and exaggerated eyeliner, he was looking at her unceremoniously. It turned out to be Gulin. Xiaoling's temper has become much better than before in the past few years. This is not because her self-cultivation has improved, but because there are not many things worth fighting for. Now that he saw Gulin, he didn't have much reaction. He didn't even want to pay attention to her. He changed into a comfortable position and continued to look at the fallen leaves half asleep. Gulin was very angry when she saw her such neglect. "Yes, Ling, what's your attitude? Is it great to be a queen? Why did you come to Nanshan Club?" Xiaoling thought she was too noisy and covered her ears. Gulin was furious and stretched out her hand to pull her. "Speak to me. You already have children, why are you getting involved with brother Li Lei again? How shameless are you asking him to stand up for your children?" Xiaoling finally woke up and squinted her eyes slightly. What does it mean to be mixed up with Li Lei? Stand up for your child? It seems that Gu Lin knows a lot. She is obviously well prepared and is going to investigate. She sat up straight from the tree stump, pulled up the gauze shawl on her body, and asked Gu Lin, "What does the matter between me and Li Lei have to do with you?" There was a bit of laziness in her voice, which was very pleasant. "It has nothing to do with me," Gu Lin exploded like a cat whose tail was stepped on. "How could it have nothing to do with me? Brother Lei already has a son, you bad woman. He actually went to destroy Brother Lei's family. Now that I've seen it, I can't ignore it." Xiaoling was speechless. She wondered whether it was she who didn't wake up, or Miss Gu who didn't wake up. What is the logic behind what she said? If Li Lei's family is not destroyed, what qualifications does she have to intervene? How come so many years have passed and Miss Gu has not made any progress at all? Looking at Gu Lin, who was as stupid as ever, Xiaoling felt as if the past 4 years did not exist. She smiled and said lightly, "Miss Gu is very interested in meddling in other people's family affairs. I don't see how you are so protective of Sutang. When you see her and Li Lei's family being destroyed, you become impatient." Jumped out. Gu Lin's face turned blue and white. Why was she doing it for Sutang? Xiaoling said, "Li Lei's son Li Rui is not mine, but he is not yours either. So what if you drive me away? He still has his own mother, so who will get the upper hand? Let me see. Instead of wasting your energy and talking with me here, you should go find the child's biological mother and deal with her properly." "You," Gu Lin's face turned red. Xiaoling thought she didn't want to. If she could defeat Sutang, she would have torn that shameless to pieces long ago. But Sutang was so scheming, gave birth to Brother Lei's son, and received the approval of Mr. Li. She was no match at all. Originally, she had given up on Brother Lei. When she learned the news of the birth of his son, she locked herself in her room and cried heartily. But over the years, she had made so many rich boys as boyfriends, but none of them had any passion at all. All she could think about was the man with the bright smile in her memory. "Finally, I look forward to Brother Lei returning to China. Gu Lin has already made plans to destroy his family and become a mistress. However, Brother Lei didn't even give her a chance to be a mistress. He kept his distance from her in a personable and polite manner. What's more, he supported Sutang to alienate her, intentionally or unintentionally." Gu Lin was very sad and angry, but there was nothing she could do. Sutang's methods were so sinister and terrifying that she suffered several hidden losses and almost lost her reputation. She never dared to provoke him again. She was getting more and more desperate day by day. Unexpectedly, things took a turn for the worse. Brother Lei separated from Sutang and started dating the woman named Ye Ling again. Gu Lin was extremely happy. Sutang was difficult to deal with. Could it be that Ye Ling was also difficult to deal with? In her opinion, Ye Ling is nothing more than a scumbag. As long as she, Miss Gu, moves her finger, she can make people disappear in a matter of minutes. In her extreme excitement, Miss Gu ignored one thing. Could it be an ordinary woman who could Li Lei away from Sutang? How could she think that she was not even as good as Sutang? She took a deep breath and said to Xiaoling arrogantly, "Why don't you take that child of yours and get out of the Nanshan Club? It's so funny that you bought a crossbred horse and dared to come here to show off, so don't be embarrassed." She insisted on fighting Xiaoling to the end, so Xiaoling had no choice but to accompany her. However, her method of accompanying her was quite unique. She made a phone call directly. "Li Lei, you're not coming back yet? Your old lover came to visit and behaved in front of me. What do you want to do?" Who made the mistake? Gu Lin was furious. Xiaoling was too lazy to pay attention to her and counted the seconds silently in her mind. When she counted to 30, a man's figure appeared in the rest area covered with fallen leaves, holding a large ice cream cone in his hand. I remember that you like hazelnut flavor. The vanilla latte and passionate chocolate here are also good, so I asked the master to mix a little of it. Here he handed the thing in his hand to Xiaoling, even the corner of his eye. Huang didn't even look at Gulin. Seeing Xiaoling take a bite, and ask hurriedly, "Is it delicious?" That look is like a puppy eager for praise. Xiaoling felt better after eating the sweets and said somewhat reservedly. Li Lei smiled contentedly. The two showed off their affection like no one else was around, and Gulin almost gritted her teeth with hatred. She couldn't stand it anymore and rushed to him and shouted, "Brother Lei." Li Lei turned around as if he had just seen her. "Linlin, why are you here?" Gulin was about to cry, "Brother Lei, you lied to me. You once told me that you would not consider other women in this life. For your family and for Xiaorui, I chose to quit. But now? Why? Why can you give up everything for her?" Li Lei frowned. "Linlin, don't make trouble." "Who is making the fuss?" Gulin's eyes were red. "Why did you accompany this woman to Nanshan? Why did you stand up for her son?" Li Lei looked at this unreasonable girl and said calmly, "Yes, I told you that I will not consider other women in this life, because, from the beginning to the end, I have only considered Xiaoling." End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 718. Chapter 718 Kill for Life. Gulin was struck by lightning and stood frozen on the spot. It turned out that the girl he liked from beginning to end was not Sutang at all, let alone Gulin. Only the petite and inconspicuous Yexing Ling in front of him was the love of his life. How could such a stupid and unspectacular win Brother Lei's heart? Gulin's voice trembled. "Brother Lei, she is not worthy of you." Li Lei said calmly, "Whether you are worthy or not is not decided by outsiders. Linlin, if we really want to talk about it, I am not worthy of Xiaoling." He lowered his head and looked at Xiaoling tenderly, his eyes deep. Xiaoling smiled and was non-committal. She doesn't think he's not worthy of her. People like him are unique in the world, so dazzling that she falls in love with him. However, she did not intend to tell him these thoughts. She was afraid that he would not cherish things that were obtained too easily. Her brother said that only when a man has withstood the test can he be qualified to embrace a beautiful woman. She cared too much about him and was overwhelmed, so she could only follow her brother's guidance. Gulin saw the calm look on her face, and the unknown anger in her heart became even more intense. This bitch. If she could be forgiven for losing to Sutang, she was the mother of Brother Lei's child after all, but what did losing to Xiaoling mean? This woman is nothing. Gulin took 2 steps forward, raised her hand high, and slapped Xiaoling. Xiaoling instinctively turned sideways to avoid it, and the slap flew into the air and was caught by Li Lei. "Brother Lei, you," Gulin glared at Li Lei angrily. She couldn't believe that Brother Lei, who had doted on her so much since she was a child, would stop her. Just then she was about to say something angrily. Suddenly, she heard a crisp pop ring. She covered her face, and it took her a few seconds to realize that it was Brother Lei who had hit her. The incident happened so suddenly that Gulin's mind went blank. She stared at Li Lei with wide eyes, her chest heaving, angry and aggrieved. Brother Lei beat her. Brother Lei actually beat her. She had been pampered and pampered by the Gu family since she was a child. How had she ever been treated like this? She shook her head and staggered back 2 steps, teetering. "This slap is given to you for Xiaoling." Li Lei looked at Gulin and said in a cold voice, "Gulin, you know best what you did to Xiaoling 4 years ago. I did it for Grandpa Gu's sake back then. I didn't treat you harshly, but now you're doing it worse. If you continue to have trouble with Xiaoling, don't blame me for settling old and new accounts." "What did I do 4 years ago?" Gulin was so angry that she burst into tears. In her mind, the only time she felt sorry for Xiaoling was when she felt sorry for Xiaoling. How could there be a time when Xiaoling felt sorry for herself? Li Lei, please tell me clearly. Why do you protect her and spit on others just to please her? Wu. Her voice was loud, attracting some people nearby to look over. Li Lei looked cold and said only 4 words, Nangang Kinja. Gu Lin suddenly remembered something and her body shook violently, as if struck by lightning. Nangang Kinja, Nangang Kinja. 4 years ago, it was all because of that Nangang Kinja who gave her the idea to cause the anthelmintic drug incident and framed the lives of 2 orphans on Xiaoling. Later, the matter was revealed, and the Nangang family was wiped out by the furious Li Lei clan, but she, Gu Lin, escaped. She was still lucky. Maybe Brother Lei didn't know about it, but she didn't expect that he had known it for a long time. I still remember her in my heart, and I still feel sorry for her. Gu Lin was trembling with fear. It was a serious crime of murder. If it was exposed, wouldn't it be enough to just slap him? No. I didn't do it. Her teeth chattered, and she didn't care about causing trouble for Xiaoling. She hurriedly said to Li Lei, Brother Lei, believe me. The death of the children in the orphanage is none of my business. Li Lei, shut up. However, it was too late to give up. Xiaoling had a very good ear and asked, what about the death of a child in an orphanage? What happened 4 years ago? Li Lei cursed himself in his heart. Why did he underestimate Miss Gu's IQ? He originally just wanted to scare her so that she would not cause trouble to Xiaoling in the future, but who knew that she couldn't bear the scare, so she suddenly leaked what happened back then. Xiaoling didn't know about that matter. He never wanted her to know that back then. It was because Gu Lin was jealous of her that she sent inferior anthelmintics to the orphanage at the instigation of Nangang Kinja, resulting in the death of 2 innocent children. He was afraid that Xiaoling would blame herself. But now, I can't hide it anymore. He turned to look at Xiaoling and told the past events. Xiaoling didn't expect to hear such a shocking truth, and it took her a while to come back to her senses. So, Li Lei, you have been hiding it from me for so many years. She had mixed feelings in her heart. In order not to make him sad, she hid it. She had received the news about her biological son, and in order not to make her sad, why didn't he hide it? Li Lei looked at her carefully. Xiaoling, you all blame me. He was afraid that Xiaoling would be angry. However, now that she has a biological son, she is no longer the fragile and self-doubting girl. She still blames herself for the death of the 2 children, but she will not be depressed because of it. She looked at Li Lei with a pair of clear eyes. You should have told me earlier. With his puzzled eyes, he stepped forward and slapped Gu Lin hard in the face with his bow left and right. Gu Lin didn't expect that even she would dare to attack her. She was beaten to the ground, covered in dirt, and her forehead hit the tree trunk and broke the skin. Gu Lin cried even harder, Yes Ling. I really didn't do it. Why did you hit me? Xiaoling's eyes showed rare cruelty, and she looked at Gu Lin coldly. I want to call the police. Speaking, he took out his mobile phone. The most unseen thing in her life is for rich and powerful people to bully helpless orphans, not to mention that the 2 orphans died because of her. She originally thought that the matter had been settled long ago, but she did not expect that the real culprit who caused the death of the 2 children was still at large. She reached out to dial the number, but another hand reached out from behind and pressed hers. Li Lei. Xiaoling, calm down, he said. Xiaoling turned to look at him. Li Lei, I can understand you not letting me know the truth. But why don't you bring her to justice? Her friendship with you is more important than human life. There was a hint of anger in her voice. Li Lei knew that she was really angry and said calmly, It's not her friendship with me, it's the friendship between her Gu family and my Li family. Xiaoling, nothing can happen to her, otherwise, neither my grandfather nor Grandpa Gu will let you go. He knows that Xiaoling is the phoenix of the Xia family, but now that she cannot return to the family, the Xia family's power is limited even if it protects her. He was afraid that she would not be able to withstand the anger of the two bosses. Even if he protects her from wind and rain, he is still afraid that 100,000 steps away will affect her safety, and he cannot afford to take even 1/10,000th of a risk. Xiaoling said, "Kill a person to pay for his life." End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 719. Chapter 719. I really called the police. In the cool wind of early autumn, her voice was clear and cold. Gu Lin's face turned pale. What are you talking about? I don't understand. What is murder for life? The death of those two children has nothing to do with me at all. Yasing Ling, don't spit on others. Xiaoling sneered lightly and said nothing. Now that she has decided to call the police will punish her, so there is no need for me to waste any more words. Instead, he turned around and said to Li Lei, "You don't have to help me with this matter, but don't hinder me. Otherwise, don't blame me for turning against you." After saying this, I put the ice cream back into his hand, turned around and left. After taking a few steps, Li Lei caught up with her, grabbed her body, and put the ice cream into her hand again. "What kind of temper do you have?" The handsome man looked down at the girl in front of him through the faint breeze of wood leaves. He was a little angry and helpless. "I just left, can you give me some face?" She thought for a few seconds. "Why should I give you face?" Li Lei became even more angry. "You are my woman, how could I not help you?" Xiaoling, "I am not your woman." Li Lei, "I helped you, and you are the one." Xiaoling, "You haven't helped me yet." Li Lei, "Let's go, I will accompany you to call the police." She didn't know the trouble of this matter. How could it be as simple as calling the police? This case had been settled as an accident at first, but now the old score is being reopened, involving all aspects of people, things, and it is intricate and complex. Furthermore, there is pressure from the Gu family. He thought of Gu Lin's pale expression just now, and had no doubt that the Gu family would deal a cruel blow to Xiaoling. Xiaoling then looked at him seriously. "Do you really want to help me? The Gu family and your family have such a good relationship. If you help me on this matter, maybe the friendship between your two families for so many years will be ruined." Li Lei did not answer, but firmly held her hand and walked forward. So what if the friendship between the Gu and Li families is ruined? In life, there are things to do and things not to do. It was the Gu family who first violated the limit of his beloved woman, which also violated his limit. In this case, he had already given the Gu family a chance and did not reveal the matter back then. However, despite his repeated concessions, Gu Lin intensified her actions. He has warned the Gu family many times. But this time, since Xiaoling doesn't want to endure it, she doesn't have to endure it anymore. In his world, Xiaoling was the most important thing. He had almost lost her several times. He never wanted to take that risk again. He spent 4 years squeezing Li Feng out of the core of the Li family's power and allowing his own power to compete with the old man. Wasn't it just to protect Xiaoling? What's the point of it all if you can't be by her side at the critical moment? He held her hand tighter and more firmly. Xiaoling felt the heat coming from his palm, and her heart moved slightly. This man seemed different from before. He no longer prioritized his family, but put her in a more important position. Or has he always been like this? Is it just that she didn't notice it before? There was something thoughtful about her. The two of them walked side by side until they reached a fork in the road. Xiaoling instinctively turned to the left and Li Lei to the right. Xiaoling was stunned for a moment and said, "The direction to the hotel is to the left. Let's go back and tidy up. We will wait for Xiao Hui to come back and stay overnight." Then we will drive back to the city early tomorrow morning and go to the city police station to call the police. Lilei said, you said you wanted to call the police in front of Gulin. Gulin will definitely tell the Gu family soon. Once the Gu family does anything, bribes the police or destroys evidence, things can easily change. Xiaoling, I just said we've already called the helicopter. Let's go to the helipad and go back to City S to call the police. Xiaoling didn't think as deeply as he did. She nodded and asked, what about Xiao Hui? Lilei said, I have asked Du Yunfan and Du Zheng to take good care of him. They are very reliable, don't worry. Although Xiaoling had some troubles with Du Yunfan in the past, she also understood that Du Yunfan was a close friend of life and death and worthy of trust. When she heard that Xiao Hui was under their care, she was completely relieved and followed him towards the tarmac. Fortunately, he is there. Arrange things in an orderly manner. Even if she now has a net worth of tens of billions and is a queen that everyone can only look up to, even if she has the determination and courage to accomplish something, she lacks his thoughtfulness. After all, she is just a young woman, and a certain position around her can never be vacant, no matter how high she flies. She looked sideways at him and saw him talking to the staff on the tarmac. There were knife marks on his handsome face, and there was a hint of coldness in his warm smile, but he looked so reliable and reassuring. Sister, sister, find me a father. Unexpectedly, Xiao Hui's prayer came back to mind. She was a little absent-minded and followed him onto the helicopter. It took only a short time to arrive in S City and called the police at the same police station 4 years ago. The police knew that they were of high status, so they politely invited them to sit down, took detailed notes on the problems they reported, and promised to investigate immediately. Before leaving, Lilei went to see the police chief. The two had a few words alone, and then the chief personally sent them out with a smile. It is already late at night, and the cool breeze is blowing on the street. Xiaoling didn't wear much clothes when she went out, and she was shivering from the cold. Lilei took off his coat, put it on her shoulders, and asked her softly, is it cold? She shook her head, still thinking about what happened at the police station. Although the police promised to reinvestigate the case, she was not very sure whether they could successfully bring Gulin to justice. She recalled that when she thought her Xiao Hui was dead, she also reported the case to the police station and begged them to bring the murderer Xiaoyu to justice. However, until now, the police still have no evidence to catch Xiaoyu, allowing Xiaoyu to remain at large. I heard that Xiaoyu is living abroad now and living a good life. Xiaoling is very worried. If Gulin gets away with it easily, how can she be worthy of the dead children? She frowned slightly, with a faint look of worry on her face. As if he knew what she was thinking, Lilei said softly, don't worry, I won't let her get away with it easily. While he was talking, his cell phone rang. Lilei answered the call, hello, Uncle Gu. Xiaoling tilted her head, Uncle Gu. Could it be Gulin's father who called him? She became alert and listened to his voice with an attentive ear. Seeing the nervous look on her face, he simply stopped and pulled her into his arms. Well, that's what happened. His voice was low and melodious, and he put a hand on her soothingly. Still talking on the phone, Linlin was the one who provoked Xiaoling first, and exposed her secret. Since Xiaoling if Ling wants to pursue it, I have no reason not to help. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weiniang. Chapter 720. Chapter 720 Lao Jianghu. He said something more into the phone, to the effect that he refused to stop the matter. In the last sentence, his voice was gentle but firm, Uncle Gu, the friendship between our two families is not meant to be consumed like this. It doesn't matter, even if Grandpa comes, I will still have this attitude. He hung up the phone and took Xiaoling's hand again. Xiaoling asked, will this matter embarrass you? Lilei said, it's nothing to be embarrassed about. Don't think about it compared with protecting her, other things don't matter. It's easy to choose which one is more important. There is really nothing to be embarrassed about. However, she said softly, thank you. How can you and I say thank you? Only then did his voice show a hint of displeasure, because Xiaoling actually treated him as an outsider. She was startled, then understood what he meant, smiled, lowered her head and said nothing. In this life, besides him, who else could she fall in love with? Although she has not officially gotten back together with him, she will only consider whether to accept him or not for the rest of her life. There is no second person, he really doesn't have to worry. The two of them walked slowly in the night wind. Over there, the Gu family was in chaos. Gu Lin is a spoiled eldest lady who is also very timid. After Xiaoling said she wanted to call the police, she was afraid that her bad deeds would be exposed, so she didn't tell her family immediately. Several hours had passed after she struggled for a long time, did enough psychological construction, and finally told Father Gu about the incident because she was afraid of paying for it with her life. Father Gu knew the seriousness of the matter and didn't want to blame his daughter. He made the phone call to Li Lei immediately. However, it was still too late. By that time, Li Lei had already accompanied Xiaoling to make notes at the police station. He also told the police chief that he needed to protect the relevant personal and material evidence to prevent the Gu family from intervening. He himself also mobilized his subordinates and private detectives to prevent the Gu family from changing. Father Gu was too late after all. He hung up the phone and ordered people to destroy the evidence, but was unable to do anything. He knew that it was useless to look for Li Lei, so he went straight to Xiaoling the next day. Xiaoling was recording a music video on location. It was a sunny day, blue sea, and a white and delicate beach. She was wearing an exquisite swimsuit, and her shallow lines outlined her perfect figure. She walked along the waves step by step, her long hair blown by the wind, looking very beautiful. Father Gu saw many people busy on the beach through the isolation belt pulled up by the staff. Directors, photographers, stage managers, agents, etc., all surrounding her like a moon. He wanted to climb over the barrier to enter, but was stopped by the staff. Stay back, you are not allowed to enter. Very rude attitude. Father Gu felt angry, thinking that in all the years he had been in charge of Gu's company, had he ever been treated so rudely? These staff members regarded him as an ordinary fan or the media, and were afraid that he would trespass in and do something crazy. He revealed his identity, I am the president of Gu's enterprise, and I have something to do with Xiaoling. The staff member sneered, come on, why are you pretending to be the president of Gu's enterprise? How could a dignified president come here and be blocked outside like a fan? Father Gu suppressed his anger, I am really the president of Gu's enterprise. As he spoke, he handed over his business card. However, the staff member did not reach out to take the business card. He still sneered and looked at Father Gu up and down. Oh, you are quite good at acting. You dress like a dog and have a business card printed? I said, you are a newbie in this industry. The paparazzi, please be more dedicated and learn from the old paparazzi. You know it's too fake. There are often paparazzi pretending to be various identities, trying to sneak into the shooting scene. However, it is rare to pretend to be a CEO, because this kind of identity is too high, usually there is an appointment, and it is easy to be exposed. The veins on Gu's father's forehead were about to pop out. He didn't expect that he, a dignified CEO who was usually respected by thousands of people, would be ridiculed by a small staff at this age. He scolded Xiaoling 17 or 8 times in his heart. However, when he thought that his woman's future was still in the hands of others, he could only continue to endure it. Go and tell Yasin Ling, she knows me and knows that I am the president of Gu Corporation. The staff didn't even bother to inform him, rolling. While talking, he walked away. Father Gu was so angry that even a middle-aged man like him who had a successful career and an extraordinary bearing could not help but curse loudly at this time. Over there, the waves were rolling. Xiaoling looked back and turned around step by step. The camera surrounded her and captured the infinite scenery. A paparazzi patted Father Gu on the shoulder with a sympathetic look on his face. "Man, are you new here? Tell you, don't pretend to be a CEO or a government official in the future, just pretend to be a food delivery guy. You're the one who delivers food, but, what the hell," Father Gu yelled. The paparazzi was so bored that he turned around and walked away, muttering disdainfully, "Why are you dragging me? You still want to stay in this business with this attitude? You are not worthy of delivering food." His muttering was a bit loud, and when Father Gu heard it, he became even more angry and vomited blood. Filled with anger, he called his subordinates, "Hey, find me the phone number of that Yexing Ling." "What? No. Only the agent's." "Okay, the agent is the agent, give it to me quickly." He called Lin Yunan. Lin Yunan was leaning leisurely on a big rock, admiring the sea breeze and beauties with an assistant director. Suddenly he received a call from Gu's father, and he was a little embarrassed in his heart. "Why is he here?" he said enthusiastically. "Mr. Gu, right? Hello, hello. What, you are just outside the isolation zone? Wait a moment, I will come to pick you up right away, just a moment." Hang up the phone, but did not move, still looking at the scenery leisurely. The deputy director asked him, "Brother Lin, why don't you pick him up?" Lin Yunan rolled his eyes with a smile and lectured the assistant director, "Naive. When I said I asked him to wait, did I really just wait? Who the is he?" The deputy director trembled silently. "Brother Lin, he is the boss of Gu's company." "How big of a multinational company is he? Why can't he be just a toy?" Lin Yunan continued, "Learn a lesson, why didn't I pick him up right away? Since he was stopped outside, he must have not made an appointment in advance. Xiao Ling is not familiar with Gu, and she is not familiar with his precious daughter Gu Lin. If he doesn't deal with it, what good can he do if he comes here at this time? It's probably because he wants to trouble Xiao Ling for some reason. We don't know anything about the inner twists and turns, so how can we rush to see him? At least wait until Xiao Ling finishes shooting the MV and ask about Xiao Ling's causes and consequences before going to see him." When the assistant director heard this, he suddenly realized that Brother Lin was indeed Brother Lin, a veteran agent and a veteran of the world. End of this chapter.